I kept the name of my husband's firm in my coat pocket for 11 days before I called them. It was a small piece of paper, torn from the corner of an envelope I'd found on the kitchen counter, the kind my husband left lying around when he thought I wasn't paying attention. The name on it was Whitmore Financial Group, and beneath that, a phone number with a Hartford area code. I didn't know what it meant at first. I still don't know exactly why I kept it instead of throwing it away. Maybe some part of me already understood even then that something was wrong in a way I couldn't yet name. My name is Eleanor, though everyone who has ever loved me has called me Ellie. I am 69 years old. I was married for 41 years to a man named Howard, and for most of those years I believed we had built something real together, something that would outlast us both. I was wrong. I want to tell you what happened, not because I enjoy reliving it, not because I need sympathy, though God knows there were months when I would have taken it gratefully from a stranger on a bus. I want to tell you because I think there are women out there who recognize something in this story before I even get to the hard part. Women who are already living inside a version of it and don't have a name for what they're seeing. I hope this helps you name it. Howard and I met in Dayton, Ohio in the spring of 1983. I was 28 and working as an administrative coordinator at a regional insurance firm. He was 31, recently transferred from Columbus, sharp-dressed and confident in the way that men from good families sometimes are. Not arrogant, exactly, but certain. Certain that things would work out. Certain that he knew how the world operated. I was charmed by that certainty. I had grown up in a household where nothing was ever certain, where my father lost his job twice before I finished high school, and my mother held everything together with a stubbornness she never got credit for. Howard's calm felt like safety to me. That is the most honest thing I can say about why I married him. We had 3 children. Our oldest, Vincent, was born in 1985. Our daughter Joanna came 2 years later. Our youngest, Paul, arrived in 1991. When I was 36 and Howard had just made partner at the consulting firm where he'd spent the better part of a decade building a reputation. We were not a perfect family. I don't think perfect families exist outside of Christmas card photographs. Howard worked long hours. I managed the household, raised the children, and eventually returned to part-time work when Paul started middle school. I kept the books for a small dental practice 3 mornings a week, which I enjoyed more than I ever admitted out loud, because Howard had a way of making my work feel like a hobby rather than a contribution. That was the first small thing I chose not to see. There were others. The way he spoke over me at dinner parties, not cruelly, but casually. The way you speak over someone whose opinion you have stopped expecting to surprise you. The way he handled all of our finances without ever quite explaining them to me, always reassuring when I asked, always patient, always making me feel that my questions were unnecessary. He never said, "You don't need to worry about this." He just answered in a way that made further questions feel like a burden I was placing on him. I trusted him. That is not a weakness. I want to say that clearly. Trusting your spouse of 4 decades is not a character flaw. What Howard did with that trust, that is where the fault lies. I found out, or began to find out, in October of 2024. I was 68 years old. Howard was 72. Our youngest son, Paul, had recently gone through his own divorce, a painful one, and Howard had been helping him with some financial paperwork. I wasn't involved. I was never involved. That was the arrangement we had settled into over 40 years, so comfortable and so familiar that I had stopped noticing it was an arrangement at all. Paul came to the house one afternoon when Howard was out. He sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a look on his face that I recognized from when he was 12 years old and had broken something he didn't want to tell me about. He said, "Mom, I have to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." I told him, of course. He said, "Did you know Dad set up a separate LLC 3 years ago?" I did not know what he was talking about. Paul showed me a document on his phone. I read it slowly, the way you read something when your eyes are working but your brain is refusing to keep up. The LLC was called HW Consulting Partners. It had been registered in Delaware in 2021. Howard's name was not on it directly. His brother Franklin was listed as the registered agent, but Paul had found the original formation documents while helping Howard organize some files, and my name appeared nowhere. In 41 years of marriage, in every business arrangement Howard had ever made, he had always listed me as a secondary party. Always, until this one. I asked Paul what he thought it meant. He said he didn't know. He said he hoped it was nothing. He said maybe there was a tax reason, a liability reason, something straightforward and boring and explainable. He did not look like you believed that. Neither did I. I called my sister Connie that evening. She lives in Asheville, North Carolina, and she has always been the sharper of the two of us, the one who became a paralegal and spent 30 years watching marriages and estates fall apart in a lawyer's office. She listened to everything I told her without interrupting, which is her way of taking something seriously. When I finished, she said, "Ellie, you need to find out what assets are in that LLC." I said I didn't know how to do that. She said, "You start by calling a lawyer." I didn't call a lawyer right away. I waited. I went home and I looked at my husband across the dinner table and I tried to find the question I needed to ask him. I opened my mouth twice. Both times I closed it again. Because here is what I understood. Sitting there in the kitchen where I had cooked 30 years of dinners, if I asked Howard directly and he lied to me, I would know he was lying, and then I would have to decide what to do with that knowledge. And some part of me was not ready. Some part of me still needed a few more days of not knowing. That is not something I am proud of, but it is the truth. I found Connie's lawyer referral in my email the following Monday morning. A firm in Columbus called Hartley & Associates, specializing in marital asset disputes and financial fraud. I read the website for a long time. I looked at the photographs of the attorneys, which is a foolish thing to do because photographs tell you nothing. Then I closed the laptop and went to take a walk. I walked for an hour and a half. When I came home, I called the number. The attorney I met with was a woman named Sandra, which is not her real name because I've chosen to protect some identities in this telling. She was in her mid-40s, efficient and precise, and she did not waste time on pleasantries. She asked me to describe what I knew, and I described it, and she listened with a legal pad in front of her and a pen that she clicked open and clicked closed at intervals, which I came to understand was her way of thinking. When I finished, she said, "Has your husband mentioned divorce to you recently?" I said, "No." She said, "Has anything in his behavior changed in the past 2 to 3 years?" I thought about it. I said he had been traveling more for work, which I had not questioned because Howard had always traveled. I said he had seemed more distant, but I had attributed that to the natural quieting that can happen in long marriages. I said he had mentioned twice that he was thinking about restructuring some of his investment holdings for retirement purposes. He had used the word restructuring in a way that I had not followed up on. Sandra clicked her pen and said, "Mrs. Ellie, I want to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer honestly. Is there any chance your husband is preparing to file for divorce?" I sat with that question. Then I said, "I think there might be." She nodded and said, "Then we need to move quickly. If assets have been transferred to a separate legal entity before a divorce filing, the timing of those transfers matters enormously. We need to establish what existed when it was moved, and whether the intent was to shield it from marital property division." I asked her what that would require. She told me. I drove home that afternoon on autopilot, which is the only way I can describe it. My hands on the wheel. My eyes on the road. My mind somewhere else entirely, going through a marriage like someone sorting through a drawer, looking for the thing that explains the whole mess. I thought about 1997, when we refinanced the house and Howard handled all of it, and I signed where he told me to sign. I thought about 2008, when the market dropped and Howard reassured me our retirement accounts were fine, which they were, though I never independently verified that because I trusted him. I thought about 2019, when his brother Franklin came to visit, and they spent an evening together in Howard's home office with the door closed, which had struck me as slightly odd at the time, and which I had forgotten about entirely until right now. I did not confront Howard that night, or the next. Sandra had advised me to gather information first, and so I did what I was told. I started paying attention in a way I had not allowed myself to pay attention in years. What I found, with Sandra's help over the following 8 weeks, was this. 3 years prior, Howard had begun transferring portions of our joint investment portfolio into the LLC. Not all at once, small amounts, incremental, the kind of movement that looks like routine portfolio management if you don't know what you're looking for. The house, Our house, the four-bedroom colonial in Worthington, where we had raised 3 children and where I had planted a hydrangea garden that was the only garden I had ever managed to keep alive, was not yet in the LLC. But Sandra found evidence that Howard had had it appraised twice in the preceding 18 months. She said he was planning to move it. He just hadn't done it yet. I asked her how much was in the LLC. She said the current value of the transferred assets was approximately $2.2 million. I sat in her office and I did not cry. I want to be clear about that. I am not telling you that as a point of pride, because I don't think there's anything wrong with crying in a lawyer's office when you discover your husband of 41 years has been hiding money from you. I just didn't. I felt something colder than sadness, something that took me a few days to identify. What I felt was clarity. Howard filed for divorce 11 days later. He did it on a Tuesday morning while I was at my bookkeeping job, which I later understood was deliberate. He wanted me to come home to it rather than be present for it, because Howard, for all his certainty, had always been a man who avoided direct confrontation when he could arrange a distance instead. I found the papers on the kitchen counter when I got home at noon. Beneath them was a handwritten note, just one sentence. I think this is for the best for both of us. He had already moved out. I walked through the house and his closet was half emptied, his toiletries gone from the bathroom, his reading chair, the brown leather one that had sat in the corner of the bedroom for 20 years, taken. He had taken the chair. He had left the hydrangeas. I called Connie and she was on a plane the next morning. What happened over the following months I will not describe in full because the legal specifics are tedious and because that is not the part that matters most to this story. What matters is this: Sandra had prepared. She had the timeline of the asset transfers documented before Howard's attorney even filed the initial paperwork. She had evidence that the LLC had been established with the intent to remove marital assets before the divorce proceeding, which in Ohio is treated seriously by courts. Howard's attorney argued that the transfers were legitimate business restructuring. Sandra argued that a 72-year-old retired consultant does not form a Delaware LLC managed by his brother for legitimate business reasons 3 years before announcing a divorce. The judge agreed with Sandra. During all of this, I lost my children, or I thought I had. Vincent sided with his father almost immediately. He called me 2 weeks after the papers were served and told me, in a voice I didn't recognize, that I was making things unnecessarily difficult. He said if I just accepted a reasonable settlement, the family wouldn't have to go through this. I asked him what he considered reasonable. He told me that his father had worked his whole life to build what they had, and that I shouldn't be trying to take half of something I hadn't earned. I said, Vincent, I raised you for 23 years. He said that wasn't the same thing. I did not speak to Vincent again for 14 months. Joanna was more complicated. She called me every week, sometimes twice, but the calls were careful, managed, as though she was trying to stay neutral in a way that still satisfied her father. She never said she believed him over me. She also never said she believed me over him. She asked me once if I was sure about the LLC, and the way she asked it told me everything. She had already talked to Howard about it. He had already given her his version. Paul was different. Paul was the one who had brought me the document in the first place, and he did not waver. He came to Columbus twice during the proceedings to sit with me at Sandra's office. He brought me soup once, which I know sounds small but which I will not forget. He said, "Mom, you didn't do anything wrong." He said it plainly, without drama, in the way that only people who actually believe something say it. I think about what I would have done without Connie and without Paul. I think I would have gotten through it regardless, because I am my mother's daughter and she was a woman who got through things. But I think it would have cost me more. The divorce was finalized in late spring of 2025. The court ordered the dissolution of the LLC and the equitable distribution of the assets that had been transferred into it. I was awarded the house, which Howard's attorney had argued belonged primarily to Howard on the grounds that his income had funded the original purchase. Sandra argued that my contributions to the household, child care, management, 30 years of running a home that enabled Howard's career, constituted a non-monetary investment in the marital estate. She used the word contributions in a way that felt, For the first time in a very long time, accurate. I kept the house. Howard moved into a condo in Dublin, which is 20 minutes away, which I've not yet decided how I feel about. Joanna came to see me in June, 3 weeks after the finalization. She sat in the kitchen and she didn't apologize. Not exactly, but she told me she had asked her father directly about the LLC and that his answer hadn't satisfied her. She said she wished she had trusted me sooner. She said it quietly, with her eyes on her coffee cup. I told her I understood. I meant it. She is my daughter and she was in an impossible position, and I know what it is to love someone and not know what to believe about them. Vincent called me for the first time in 14 months on a Wednesday in August. He said he'd been thinking. He said things had been said that shouldn't have been. He didn't quite apologize, but he asked if we could have dinner sometime. And I said yes, because I am 69 years old and I know by now that holding on to anger is something the young can afford more than the old. We had dinner. It was awkward. We will try again. Howard and I do not speak unless it is about the children. When we do speak, he is cordial, which is not the same as kind. I do not need his kindness. I needed his honesty for 41 years, and I didn't always get it. What I have now is something clearer and harder and more mine than anything we built together. I still live in the house. The hydrangeas came back this summer, which they do every summer regardless of what else is happening, which I find comforting in a way I can't entirely explain. Connie came to visit in July, and we sat on the back porch in the evening with glasses of iced tea, and she said, "You know, Ellie, most people would have just taken the settlement." I said I knew that. She said, "Why didn't you?" I thought about it for a moment. I thought about that piece of paper in my coat pocket, the one with the phone number I kept for 11 days before I was ready to call. I thought about Sandra clicking her pen in the quiet of her office. I thought about Paul bringing me soup. I said, because it wasn't about the money. It was about the 41 years. Connie nodded and didn't say anything else, which is also her way of understanding something. There are things I still grieve, not Howard or not the Howard he turned out to be at the end. I grieve the Howard I thought I was married to, the certain, steady man who made me feel safe in a way I had needed. That man may not have existed exactly as I believed, but the feeling was real, and I lived inside it for a long time. And losing it was its own kind of loss, separate from everything else. I grieve the family dinners we won't have in the same way anymore, the holidays that will require logistics and calendar coordination where there used to be just a table and everyone around it. I grieve the version of my old age that I thought I was heading toward. I had a picture of it, vague but real, Howard and I, slower and quieter, in this house, in this garden. That picture is gone. What I have instead is the real thing. Messier and less certain, more mine. I am 69 years old. My sister calls me every Sunday. My son brings me soup when I need it. My daughter is finding her way back. My garden comes back every summer. I don't know what comes next. I have stopped pretending I do. That is enough. For now, that is more than enough. I have been thinking about what it actually means to earn something. Howard used that word against me. You earned nothing. He said it through his attorney in careful legal language, but that was the meaning underneath it. 41 years of cooking, raising children, managing a household, supporting a career that was never mine, and in his accounting, none of it counted. None of it appeared on a balance sheet, so none of it was real. I think about that word a lot now. Earned. What I know is this: the choices we make over a lifetime don't disappear just because no one is keeping score. Howard spent years building something, a business, a reputation, a careful plan to protect what he'd accumulated. He was disciplined about it, methodical. And at the end, when the court looked at the timeline of those transfers and the intent behind them, all that careful planning collapsed because it was built on something dishonest, not because the universe punished him. Because dishonesty has practical consequences. Judges see patterns. Attorneys document timelines. The thing you try to hide becomes the evidence against you. That is not a spiritual lesson. It is just how things work when you look at them clearly enough. What I also know is that I almost didn't look. I kept that piece of paper in my coat pocket for 11 days because some part of me wasn't ready to see what it meant. And I think about those 11 days sometimes, not with regret exactly, but with a kind of honesty about myself. I was afraid, not of Howard, not really. I was afraid of what I would have to become if the thing I suspected turned out to be true. I was afraid of being 68 years old and starting over. That fear was not weakness, it was human. But I made a choice to act anyway, and that choice is the only part of the story that belongs entirely to me. Connie told me once, years before any of this happened, that the most intelligent thing a person can do is ask the question they're most afraid of hearing the answer to. I didn't fully understand that until I called Sandra's office, until I sat across from a woman with a legal pad and said out loud, "I think my husband is preparing to leave me, and I think he has been hiding money." Saying it out loud did not make it more real. It was already real. What it did was give me the ability to do something about it. Paul bringing me soup. That still gets me. Not because it was a grand gesture, it wasn't, but because it was honest. He didn't know what to say, so he brought soup. That is a kind of integrity too. Showing up without knowing what to say, just showing up. I am 69 years old, and I have learned that character is not something you declare. It is something that becomes visible under pressure, including your own. Vincent showed me who he was when things got hard. So did Joanna. So did Paul. So did Howard. So did I. The garden came back this summer. I didn't do anything special to make that happen. I just didn't leave. I think that is the only wisdom I have to offer. You don't have to be certain. You don't have to feel brave. You just have to stay long enough to do the next right thing, and then the next one after that, and not let anyone, not a husband, not a lawyer, not a grown child who forgot which parent raised him, convince you that what you built with your life does not count. It counts. Every year of it counts. I earned it, and I kept it.